You know how we all have those bedtime stories we grew up with? Those classic tales that we just kind of accepted without question, like little sponges. Well, today we're going to dive into one of those stories, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And we're going to look at it with a modern lens. What if Goldilocks, that sweet little girl with the golden curls, was actually, well, a criminal?
Ooh, that's a really interesting thought. I mean, we often associate childhood with innocence, but yeah, if we look at her actions just objectively, there are some legal questions there.
Right, let's break it down. She enters the bear's house without permission, eats their porridge, breaks baby bear's chair,
Yeah.
and then she just takes a nap in their beds, like it's no big deal.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit like a police report when you put it that way.
Seriously, breaking and entering over a bowl of porridge and a quick nap. Seems a little extreme, right?
Oh, I mean, entering a house without permission would probably be considered trespassing, and depending on where you are, eating the porridge and damaging the furniture could fall under theft or property damage.
Okay, so maybe she wasn't some hardened criminal. Maybe she was just lost and hungry.
Right, that's where the idea of intent comes in. Legally speaking, we talk about mens rea, which basically means guilty mind. To be found guilty of a crime, it usually needs to be proven that the person acted intentionally, knowing that what they were doing was wrong. With Goldilocks, though, it gets a bit trickier. Was she deliberately being malicious, or was she just a kid, just acting kind of naively?
So it's not as black and white as it seems. But here's where things get really interesting. Did you know there's another version of the Goldilocks story? Like a less known one. And in this version, she's not the sweet little girl we're all used to picturing.
Oh yeah, that version definitely paints a very different picture.
Totally. Forget the lost little girl. This Goldilocks is described as an older woman, all unkempt, sometimes even using some, well, let's just say colorful language. Imagine that a potty-mouthed Goldilocks, a far cry from the innocent kid we know. And in some versions, she's even depicted as homeless and crazy.
Right.
That's about a shift in perspective.
It really is remarkable how that alternate portrayal changes how we see the whole story. And Goldilocks herself. Suddenly, her actions seem less like harmless childhood antics and more like deliberate transgressions.
Absolutely. It really makes you wonder if we'd be more or less sympathetic to this homeless Goldilocks. Does her appearance automatically make her seem more suspicious? Does it subconsciously influence our judgment of her actions?
It's a fascinating point. Our perceptions are often shaped by societal biases, and appearance plays a huge role in that. We tend to make snap judgments based on how someone looks, even if those judgments are inaccurate or unfair.
So we have these two contrasting images of Goldilocks, the innocent child and the unkempt woman. But let's go back to the version we all know, the one with the cute little girl wandering through the woods. Isn't there something kind of problematic about normalizing trespassing and property damage, even in a children's story? I mean, are we subtly teaching kids that it's okay to walk into someone's house, eat their food, and break their stuff?
You've hit on a crucial point there. The way we frame actions in stories, especially for kids, it can definitely have a lasting impact on how they see right and wrong. Even seemingly harmless tales can carry kind of implicit messages about what's acceptable behavior.
Yeah, it's almost like we're looking at Goldilocks through all these different lenses, right?
hmm
One shows us the legal side of things, another, societal biases, and then another, the power of stories themselves. And each one adds like another layer to the story, prompts us to ask different questions.
It is wild how this simple little children's story has so much depth to it. We're not just like rehashing the plot. We're really getting into the themes and how they, reflect our own values and sometimes even our own biases.
Exactly. And speaking of those biases, let's go back to homeless Goldilocks for a second. It's interesting how just her appearance being described as unkempt, maybe even crazy, it instantly makes her actions seem more threatening.
Yeah, it's like we automatically assume the worst about her based on how she looks. Like suddenly she's not just hungry and tired. She's a potential danger to society. Yeah, it really does highlight how deep those societal biases can be. We often connect homelessness, mental health challenges with criminality, even when there's no real connection.
It's a sobering thought. It's like we're more willing to forgive a cute little girl for breaking and entering
Yeah.
than a woman who might be struggling, with poverty, mental health issues.
Right. It exposes a kind of uncomfortable truth about how we judge others based on just superficial things. And it begs the question, if Goldilocks had been well-dressed, articulate, would we even be having this conversation? Would we even be asking if she's a criminal?
Probably not. We'd probably be praising her resourcefulness or her adventurous spirit. But that's the
Yeah.
power of stories, right? They shape how we see things, even when we don't realize it.
Absolutely. Stories have this incredible power to influence how we understand the world, our values, even our prejudices. So it's really important to be aware of the stories we hear, the ones we tell, and to question what messages they might be sending, even unintentionally.
Okay, so we need to be mindful of the stories, especially the ones we're sharing with kids. But what about the original Goldilocks, the one we all grew up with? What's the takeaway there? Are we supposed to be teaching our kids it's okay to break into houses, eat people's porridge?
I think the takeaway is less about specific actions. It's more about respecting boundaries,
Hmm.
understanding that our actions have consequences. Even though Goldilocks doesn't get punished in the traditional story, she does upset the bears, disrupts their home, leaves Baby Bear with a broken chair.
Right, and she runs away scared at the end. Maybe
Yeah.
there is, like, a subtle message in there about the consequences of her actions, even if it's not, like, explicitly stated.
Maybe. But it is worth pointing out that the story doesn't really condemn her behavior either. You know, it's
Yeah.
presented as this lighthearted adventure, which is something to think about when we're sharing the story with little kids. It's always good to use these stories as opportunities for discussion, critical thinking.
So we're back to nuance and critical thinking. It's not about banning Goldilocks or any other story. It's about engaging with them thoughtfully, using them to start discussions,
Oh,
and to learn.
exactly. Stories are powerful tools for teaching, for learning. But it's on us to use them responsibly and to encourage that critical thinking in ourselves and others.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. What about those bears? I mean, they left their porridge out, their house was unlocked, beds unmade. Weren't they being a little, I don't know, careless, maybe even a little responsible for this whole mess?
That's an interesting way to look at it. You're suggesting that maybe they were negligent, leaving their home vulnerable?
Exactly. If they just locked their door or put their porridge away, Goldilocks wouldn't have been able to get in or eat their food.
It really brings up the question of responsibility, accountability. Were the bears just too trusting, or was Goldilocks simply too opportunistic?
And it makes you wonder, what would have happened if the bears had been home when Goldilocks barged in? Now that would be a twist.
Now there's a scenario. The story totally changes if we imagine the bears, actually confronting Goldilocks in their home. Think about it. Their surprise, their anger even.
Right. It goes from a whimsical little story to a thriller like that.
Exactly. Suddenly we have all these new questions. How would the bears react? Would Goldilocks apologize? Would she try to explain herself? Or would things escalate?
And who would we side with in that situation? The bears protecting their home or Goldilocks? Would our opinions be swayed by her age, her appearance?
These questions really challenge us to think, don't they? They force us to consider all the different perspectives and the gray areas of what's right and wrong. It's not just a cute story anymore. It's about human behavior, societal norms, the consequences of our actions, intended or not.
It's crazy how this deep dive has taken us from a children's story to talking about law, ethics, even home security.
That's the beauty of critical thinking, though, isn't it? It lets us pull apart a story, see the hidden meanings, connect ideas that seem totally separate.
And in the case of Goldilocks, it's challenged us to rethink our own judgments, how we understand intent, and the power of stories to shape how we see the world. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this tale.
There's always more to explore, isn't there? Every story, every event has the potential to be, unpacked, analyzed, revealing new insights, challenging what we thought we knew.
We spent a lot of time thinking about Goldilocks and what she did. But what if? What if there's more to it? What if there was a reason, like a justification for what she did, that we haven't even thought of?
Mm. You're right. We've been so focused on the laws, the societal stuff. We haven't really looked at it from, a human perspective. What if Goldilocks had a real reason for going into that house? Maybe she was lost, scared, desperate.
Yeah, imagine like you're a little girl, all alone in the woods. Maybe you got separated from your family or you're running away from something scary. You see a house, a safe place, and you act instinctively. It's easy to judge her without thinking about why she might have done it.
Right. Context is everything. We can't rule out the possibility that there were things going on, things we don't know about, that led her there. We're filling in the blanks ourselves, but the truth could be completely different.
It's a good reminder that there are always different ways to see things. We like to go with the simplest explanation, but sometimes it's just more complicated than that.
Exactly. And that's a good lesson for all of us, right? In our own lives. We meet people, we run into situations every day where we have to stop, take a minute, get the facts, see things from different angles before we decide anything.
So after all this, after this whole deep dive, Can we really say if Goldilocks was a criminal or not?
I don't think there's an easy answer. It depends on what we even mean by criminal. It depends on why she did what she did. It depends on how we're looking at the story. It's a question that makes you think, makes you debate.
Yeah, this has been so much more than just talking about a childhood story. We've gone into law, ethics, human nature, all starting with this simple tale.
And that's what makes it so interesting. We went beyond just the surface and found all these layers, these interpretations we never would have thought of otherwise.
So as we wrap things up here with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, we want to leave you with one last thought. What if, what if the bears had been home when Goldilocks went in? How would that have changed everything? Would it have been a story about forgiveness, understanding, or would it be like this tense showdown with crazy consequences?
It's definitely something to think about. The whole story takes on a different feel when you change that one thing, when you add that uncertainty.
So keep thinking about these questions. Keep exploring the stories around you, but do it with a curious mind and a critical mind. And until next time, happy deep diving.
Thank you for joining CMF Conspiracies podcast. If you have a conspiracy you wish for us to deep dive into, please send your topic to our email address or leave it in the comments.